The network that found floor 21. Floor 21, Episode 7. I do not believe in haunted houses. I believe in bad wiring, forgotten passwords, and cheap routers stacked in closets they were never meant to sit in. You can tell me a place is cursed and I will nod politely. Then I will ask for the admin password. I am a freelance network technician. Most people just call me the Wi-Fi guy. My work is mostly small businesses and older apartment buildings that want to pretend they are modern. They call me when the signal drops, when tenants complain, when their phones see too many networks and not enough internet. I draw maps for a living, they just happen to be maps made of invisible radio waves. This building should have been like all the others. 20 floors, steel and concrete, patchwork renovations, a lobby trying very hard to look more expensive than it is. The property manager called me on a Thursday afternoon. We have a Wi-Fi situation, he said. Tenants are complaining. The last guy who handled our network won't return calls. I just want it stable. His name was Harris. He sounded tired in the way people do when the building owns them instead of the other way around. Any details? I asked. Slow speeds, dropped connections, weird names, what? He hesitated. One of the complaints is about a network that is not on our list, he said. Something called floor_21 or 21_guest shows up at night. People say they connect to it by mistake. I checked our controller. We don't broadcast anything like that. I pulled my phone away from my ear and looked at the address he had texted me. I knew the street. I had done a job in a cafe 2 blocks away last year. I will come by tomorrow morning, I said. Bring your paperwork. And whatever the last guy left behind. I thought it would be a misconfigured guest SSID. Maybe some neighbor's router bleeding into their spectrum. I did not expect the network diagram to show me a floor that was not on the plans. Not at first. Not until I started counting. The lobby was brighter than I expected. New lighting, polished tile. But behind the front desk, the air had that old building weight. You can smell concrete and history if you work in enough basements. Harris met me with a folder under his arm and a coffee he had clearly forgotten to drink. Thanks for coming, he said. Our ISP says everything on their end is fine. So it must be us. He led me past the elevators to a small room with a sign on the door. Telecom closet, authorized personnel only. Inside was the usual chaos. A metal rack with a core switch and a router, fan grills dusty. A mess of blue and yellow Ethernet cables. A small UPS humming in the corner. And on the wall, taped crookedly above the rack, a simplified diagram of the building's network. A rectangle for each floor, stacked from 1 to 20. Lines running from each rectangle back to a box labeled core. Someone had drawn it in marker and never updated it. 20 floors, I said, more to myself than to him. On paper, Harris replied. That is what I am supposed to say. He handed me the folder. Inside were invoices from the last consultant, a printed subnet list, and a cheat sheet of SSIDs. Building_secure. Building_guest. Staff_only. Camera_net. No floor_21. Tenants send you screenshots? I asked. He pulled out his phone and flicked through his messages. He showed me several blurry images. Wi-Fi pickers on phones and laptops, the usual list of networks. At the bottom of some of them, where the scroll stopped, a few names repeated. Floor_21. 21_guest. F21_stairs. They say it only shows up late, he said. Between midnight and 4. Never during the day. Maybe a neighbor next door has a sense of humor, I said. Seen the MAC addresses? He shrugged. That is why you are here. I plugged my laptop into an open port on the core switch and logged into the router. The config was a mess, but familiar. Multiple VLANs. One for tenants. One for cameras. One for management. No SSID named floor_21 defined anywhere. I launched a spectrum scanner and watched the air fill with noise. In a city building, Wi-Fi never sleeps. Phones broadcast. Routers shout over each other. On 2.4 GHz, the usual clutter. On 5 GHz, a little cleaner. I walked the lobby, the first floor, the elevators, watching the scanner's list of SSIDs update. Building_guest, strong near the lobby. Staff_only, hovering around the management office. A coffee shop a few doors down bleeding into the front wall. No floor_21. I wrote that off as good news. It is always better when the ghost you are chasing refuses to show up on its own. It means you can tell yourself it will never come back. Still, I scheduled a return visit for late that night. If the phantom SSID only appeared between midnight and 4, that was when I needed to listen. Harris grimaced but agreed. I will have security let you in, he said. Try not to break anything the lawyers care about. I came back just before midnight with a portable battery, a handheld analyzer, and a stronger coffee. The building felt different in the dark. The lobby lights were dimmer. The air had cooled. The elevators hummed more softly. The night guard, a bored man scrolling his phone at the desk, nodded me toward the telecom room. Manager said you might be here all night, he said. As long as you do not pull the fire alarm, we are good. Inside the closet, the equipment LEDs cast dancing blue and green shapes on the wall. I set my laptop on a crate and started the scan. At first, the results were identical to before. Building_guest. Camera_net. Some apartments broadcasting their own little islands of Wi-Fi. Around 1:15 a.m., a new entry slid into the list. SSID, floor_21. Security, WPA2. Signal strength, weak, but definitely there. I froze. The analyzer traced its bzzz and guessed its location based on relative signal. Somewhere above me. Not much above. Not too far to either side. I started moving. Out into the hallway, I watched the signal strength rise toward the stairwell. At the bottom of stair A, it was a little stronger. Halfway to the second floor, it dipped. Near the third, it rose again. The source was not on the low floors. I took the elevator up, stopping at 15, then 18, checking the signal on each landing. Stronger. By 19, floor_21 was one of the top entries in range. The analyzer's little radar said the source was above and slightly offset. I stepped into the stairwell between 19 and 20. The air felt cooler, like someone had cracked a window in a place that did not have windows. The signal climbed. At one mid-landing, the bar graph jumped sharply. The analyzer reported. Floor_21. Approximate distance, 3 to 5 meters. I looked around. Concrete walls. Metal handrails. An emergency light buzzing faintly. No visible access point. If this had been a normal job, I would have started knocking on doors, looking above ceiling tiles, asking who had plugged in what. Here, there was nowhere to knock. Hidden AP, I muttered. Or a very bad joke. I took a photograph of the stairwell landing with my phone, out of habit. Location, between 19 and 20. Then I went back to the telecom closet. On the way down, the floor_21 network dipped and flickered, then dropped entirely. By the time I sat back down at my laptop, it was gone. The spectrum returned to its usual crowded mess. The next day, I dove deeper into the core switch logs. If someone had plugged in an unauthorized access point, even one not managed by the building's controller, it still had to get its traffic from somewhere. Ports chattered with MAC addresses. Tenant routers. Smart TVs. Security cameras. I filtered for anything that had passed traffic in the early hours of the night. Between midnight and 4, one port in particular showed spikes. Port 19 on the distribution switch that fed floors 18 through 20. Tagged VLANs, tenants, cameras. Nothing unusual. But one MAC address caught my eye. Not because of what it was. Because of what it was labeled as. On the old consultant's notes, in a half-erased scribble next to that MAC, someone had written AP_20/21, stair_A. Then crossed it out. Below, in different handwriting, someone had added, not in use. But the log said it was in use. Not often. Not heavy. Just a few bursts, always between midnight and 4. Small packets. Management frames. Beacons. Whispers in the air. I pinged the address that MAC had last used. The request should have timed out. Devices that old, unlabeled, and allegedly inactive usually vanish from the network once someone gets tired of paying for their power. Instead, I got a reply. Time, 21 milliseconds. An IP in a subnet that did not exist in the current config. 10.21.21.21. Someone had a sense of humor. I pinged it again. 4 replies. No loss. No host name. Just a cold, steady echo. Behind me, the telecom room's air shifted as the building's ventilation kicked in. The hairs on my arms rose. I told myself it was the fan. I opened a browser and pointed it at that address. The page took a long time to load. Then, in a plain default font, a login prompt appeared. User. Pass. No branding. No logo. No vendor name. Just 2 empty boxes and a button. If you work in my field long enough, you learn 3 rules. Never guess admin credentials on a network you do not own. Never log into a device someone tells you does not exist. And never, ever reuse a password you care about on something that gives you a bad feeling. I broke 2 of those rules that night. I did not use my usual credentials. I tried the building's default pattern from the other devices. User, admin. Pass, the same default they had never changed on anything else. The screen flickered. Then a very simple interface appeared. At the top, a name. AP_20_21_stairs. Below that, a single status line. Location, between 19 and 20. Clients connected, 0. Uptime, 365 days, 21 hours, 21 minutes. I stared at that for a long time. The date of initial uptime was exactly 1 year before. The day, I later realized, when the first tenant complained about the stairs feeling longer had been logged in the building's maintenance system. There was a tab labeled radio. I clicked it. The page showed a basic layout of channels and power levels. 2.4 GHz, disabled. 5 GHz, enabled, low power. Beacon SSID, floor_21, hidden. Guest SSID, 21_guest, hidden. The checkboxes for broadcast were unchecked. And yet, the analyzer had seen floor_21 last night. The AP thought it was quiet. The air said otherwise. I clicked the Clients tab. A blank table. No active connections. At the bottom, a button. Show log. I hesitated. Then clicked. The log was a list of association and disassociation messages. Devices connecting and disconnecting. Most entries were junk. Phones from random tenants, named like Jill_iPhone. TV_19B. Tablet_Kid8. but scattered among them were entries I could not ignore. Cam21_buff. Lee_patrol. Marta_main. Fireplan_s. Window rec. Client names in the system are not usually this poetic. Someone has to type them. Cam21_buff connected for exactly 21 seconds at 3:13 a.m. one night. Lee_patrol pinged it twice over a span of 5 minutes, months ago. Marta_main associated just long enough to be recorded. Fireplan_s appeared during one of the building's fire drills. Window rec showed up only once, at 2:47 a.m., with a signal strength that suggested it was coming from across the street. Whoever had named these clients knew more about the building's stories than I did. Or the AP had been watching more than just packets. I scrolled to the bottom. The most recent entry was from the night before. Client, viewer_local. Duration, 21 seconds. RSSI, -21 dBm. The MAC address matched my laptop. I had never joined floor_21. At least, I had not meant to. Maybe I had brushed against it for a moment when my wireless adapter auto-scanned. Maybe the AP had decided that was enough to count. A new line appeared in the log while I watched. Client, closet_monitor. Duration, 1 second. RSSI, -10 dBm. The MAC was the core switch. The AP was talking to the rest of the building. Not often. Just once in a while. Enough to say, I am still here. You find anything? Harris asked later that day, when I emerged from the telecom closet looking worse than when I went in. Your network needs a rebuild, I said. Too many unmanaged devices. Too many leftover configurations. Some old hardware that should be retired. That was all true. It was not all I had found. Can you fix it? He asked. Some of it, I said. Not tonight. And not all at once. He rubbed his forehead. I keep thinking we just need a reset, he said. Start over. New panels. New cameras. New everything. Sometimes starting over means tearing down more than you want, I replied. I did not mention the AP that thought it lived between 19 and 20. I did not mention the SSID that did not admit it was broadcasting. I did not mention the client list that read like a roll call of people who had walked too far into the building's hidden spaces. Instead, I recommended replacing the visible access points with a managed system. I suggested a new naming scheme. No cute floor labels. No inside jokes. Just neutral, forgettable names. He agreed. We scheduled the work for the next month, piece by piece. I told myself that when we were done, the ghost in the network would either show itself properly or fade away. Over the following weeks, I came and went with armfuls of hardware. New access points for the hallways. Post switches for the upper floors. I walked stair A and stair B so many times that my legs learned every chip in the concrete. Between 19 and 20, the air always felt a little colder. My analyzer still picked up floor_21 occasionally. Not every night. Not ever in exactly the same way. Sometimes it was strongest right on the mid-landing. Sometimes it was stronger slightly off to the side, as if the source had shifted a meter or two through the wall. Once, it appeared for only a minute, broadcasting an SSID I did not recognize. 21_listening. I did not try to connect. That same night, the core switch logged a flurry of failed authentication attempts on the management interface. Username, admin. Password, slight variations on my own. Something was guessing. I changed every password in the system and wrote the new ones down on paper, not in any file. I locked that paper in a box. When I checked the logs the next day, the attempts had stopped. but the AP_20_21_stairs interface was still reachable at 10.21.21.21. Uptime kept climbing. The location field still said between 19 and 20. On my last scheduled day on the project, I decided to do something that did not appear on any of my invoices. I created a new SSID on one of the test access points. Not broadcast to tenants. Not part of the normal system. Just a quiet network, low power, on a channel the others were not using. I named it floor_20_only. I hid it from beacons. Then, in the interface for AP_20_21_stairs, I added a new line to the radio configuration. Trusted peer SSID, floor_20_only. It should not have done anything. Old firmware like that usually ignored fields it did not recognize. But the moment I saved the change, the AP status line flickered. Location, between 19 and 20 between 20 and 21 between 19 and 20. Then it settled back. Uptime continued without resetting. A new log entry appeared. Client, floor_20_only. Duration, 21 seconds. RSSI, -21 dBm. It had heard the name. A second later, a tiny new section of the interface unfolded. It was labeled simply View. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The page went black for a moment. Then a low-resolution video feed appeared. The viewpoint was high in a corner, looking down a narrow landing with a gray door and a handrail. No number on the door. Just concrete, lit by a dim emergency light. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then a shape crossed the field of view. A woman with a mop and a bucket, moving cautiously, glancing up as if she felt watched. The timestamp on the feed was from months ago. 18 hours 3 minutes and 21 seconds. The next frame showed a man in a security uniform, flashlight raised. Different timestamp. 3 hours 13 minutes and 21 seconds. Another frame. Someone in a t-shirt and pajama pants, holding up a phone. Another. The back of a man in a suit, hanging an evacuation diagram on the wall. All in the same physical space. All on different days. Layered by the system into a single channel. The last image in the sequence froze. It was the stair landing, empty. In the reflection on the metal push bar, distorted but unmistakable, was a person standing in a telecom closet holding a laptop. Their face was smeared by the angle, but the shape of the posture was mine. The timestamp was from 2 days in the future. I closed the browser. I unplugged my laptop from the wall. The AP interface did not time out. It did not ask if I was sure I wanted to leave. It just kept broadcasting. Quietly. Somewhere between 19 and 20. In my final report to Harris, I wrote what my contract required. Replaced legacy access points with managed system. Standardized SSIDs. Improved coverage on all floors. Remaining issue, one legacy device of unknown make and location still present on network. Recommend physical survey of stairwell risers and conduit chases if removal is required. He schemed it and signed. Is it safe? He asked. For now, I said. As safe as it was before. Safer, probably. He nodded, not entirely convinced. Do we need to put anything in the files for the next inspection? He added. Just that the stairwells have coverage now, I said. People can make calls if they need to. That is what the codes care about. I did not tell him that one of those calls might be from a place the exit diagrams did not show. I left the building that evening with my toolkit over my shoulder. On the sidewalk outside, I looked up. From the street, the stack of floors looked normal. Ground. 1. 2. I counted in my head until 20. There was nothing visibly strange between 19 and 20. Just a subtle unease, like my eyes wanted to insert one more band of concrete between them. I turned my phone's Wi-Fi back on. The list filled with names. Building_guest. Coffee shop networks. Random phones. For a second, at the bottom, one more name appeared. Floor_21. Then it vanished. I told myself it was cached from earlier. Old data. Not the air. At home that night, I drew a network diagram for a different client and caught myself stacking the symbols one higher than they should go. I erased the extra box and redrew the lines. Later, while backing up my laptop, I found a file I did not remember saving. Floor21_map.png. I almost deleted it on reflex. Instead, I opened it once. It was a simplified diagram of a building. Rectangles for floors. Thin lines for stairs. No labels. Just one thick circle around the space between 19 and 20. In the margin, in a font that did not match any of my software's defaults, one line of text. Network known. Occupants unknown. I closed the file and moved it to an encrypted drive I pretend I forget the password to. I still do network work. I still clean up messy closets and chase down ghost devices. I still draw maps. But when a building's Wi-Fi scan tells me there is something between the floors that they do not number, I do not try to force it into the plan anymore. I just mark the area on my mental map as covered. And I hope, if anyone ever connects to floor_21 on purpose, they only download stories. And not a new address for where they belong. This story is a work of fiction, created purely for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, buildings, or events is purely coincidental.